Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about the NFL draft, gave you guys a little bit of an update of where we're at, a little bit a week out, a little bit over a week, I suppose, out of the NFL draft. Gave you an idea of who's going to be in attendance and everything like that. But let's jump into some unsung heroes of the top 10 teams in the country. Now, these are the top 10 teams by the AP poll, not necessarily my top 10 teams, but this idea came from David Kenyon over at the Bleacher Report, someone that did kind of his hidden gems of the top 10 teams. So I figured I would give you guys his pick, his rationale for that, and also give you my own pick and give you, maybe you can pick a winner at the end of this if you really want to. But to start, let's go to Clemson, and let's start with Peyton Page, the pick from Kenyon, and I think that's a really interesting one. That's one that is a little bit down on the depth chart, at least over the first couple of years there, but has collected 24 tackles, for tackles for loss, so was definitely someone that, when he was on the field, was a big-time player. All the attention's going towards Peter Woods and all the guys walking out the program, but there's plenty of talent still there, and I think Peyton Page is someone that could be a huge piece to this defense in terms of rotation on that defensive line. And my pick was Wade Woodaz. And now this might be a little bit less of an under the radar type guy. I think this one is just more. I don't think everyone knows just how good this kid is. I think if you're a Clemson fan, I think you fully understand what this kid is capable of. But I think if you're a more casual football fan and you're watching Clemson and you see number 17 over and over and over again, you'll be saying, who's that kid? And it's Wade Woodaz. He's going to be all over the field. He's someone that I think is. Barrett Carter is obviously the best linebacker in that group and will be setting the pace for everyone, but man, Wade Woodaz is not as far behind him as some people might think. So very, very interested to watch him develop. I think he's one of my favorite players across the country, just the way he goes about playing football. But let's move on to number 9 in Oklahoma. David Kenyon had Jaden Gibson, which I think is a great choice. When you look at this wide receiver room, there are so many good names, right? You have Nick Anderson, who's kind of the leader of that group. Andrel Anthony was incredible last year. He was a transfer over from Michigan. You have Jaleel Farouk, and then you brought in Deion Burks from Purdue, who I think is going to be a total game changer for them this year. So the wide receiver room overall is a really, really good room. When you look across the country, you talk about Texas, you talk about Ole Miss, you talk about Georgia when you talk about or Ohio State when you talk about wide receivers. But at the end of the day, Oklahoma has a remarkably good wide receiver group, and it goes back to, as long as that O-line can hold up, I mean, guys like Jaden Gibson and all of the other guys around him can really benefit. And the great thing that Jaden Gibson does is he's explosive. At least half of his receptions went for at least 25 yards. So that is a huge benefit. When you have all these other guys to worry about underneath, this guy is just running right past your defense and scoring a touchdown. So it'll be really interesting to watch him. I think he will be a huge piece because of the arm talent and particularly the arm strength that Jackson Arnold possesses. I think he'll be utilized in this offense just a little bit more. But my pick for this was Gavin Sawchuk. I think he's someone that does not necessarily get the respect that he deserves when it comes to this offense. I think he was a huge piece to what Dillon Gabriel was able to do last year. He was, I believe, a freshman last year going into his sophomore year this year. So definitely someone that still has ability to grow, but it's remarkable watching him run the ball because he does not take no for an answer. He's someone that runs through contact very, very aggressively, is very strong, and definitely will be a huge part of this Oklahoma offense this upcoming year. But let's move on to Michigan. He has Rayshon Berry, another defensive tackle on this list, someone that is, again, stuck behind some guys just like Peyton Page is at Clemson, but can definitely make some big-time plays. He was behind Chris Jenkins, Graham, Grant, and Cam Good a year ago. He still had 27 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss. So he was a big-time player regardless of, how many people were in front of him. And now that's thinned out a little bit. So he's going to be a huge piece for them. And I think behind guys like Mason Graham and not Chris Jenkins, but Kenneth Grant, excuse me. Behind those two guys, I think he's going to be a huge rotational piece for them as they get into this season. And then my pick was Max Bredesen, the fullback for this team, the guy that is Michigan. He is as Michigan as it gets. He's someone that I'm sure Jim Harbaugh loved to no end. I'm sure Sharon Moore will love as well. So I think Max Bredesen is someone that we definitely don't talk about a lot because he's a fullback, which got to give some respect to the fullbacks out here. But Max Bredesen is as good as they come. He makes a huge difference on that offense, especially in run blocking, but he can go out and catch passes if you need him to. So a remarkably talented kid that I'm very, very excited to watch play. Even if he doesn't get the ball in his hands all the time, if you see him flatten a defensive end, it's a fun thing to watch. There's no two ways about that. But let's move on to Ole Miss. He does have Yam Banks here, who's a very, very interesting guy coming in from South Alabama. He was a first-team All-Sun Belt selection in 2022 and a third-team in 2023. So took a little bit of a step back, but was still very, very talented. He's a safety kind of nickelback. Probably will play nickelback for them if I had to imagine, with guys like Brandon Turnage on that team. But he had 96 tackles, 11.5 for loss, 7 picks, and 15 pass breakups over the 2 seasons. So this kid can do it all. He is going to be a huge piece to that back end that, if you remember last year, did not necessarily look very stout. So they definitely need as many guys on that back end as they can. They're bringing in a lot of transfers, and Yam Banks might just be the most important of the bunch, to be totally honest with you. For me, I went Jared Ivey's direction. I think he's someone that, when you look at this roster, especially the defensive line, as they've built it out over this portal period, you have Walter Nolan on the inside. You have Princely Umanmielen on the outside. You have so many incredible guys. Sunshine Perkins is a guy that I've talked about a lot on here. Jared Ivey just continues to play really good football. He was a transfer over from Georgia Tech a couple of years ago, and it took him some time to get up to speed with the SEC way of things, but at the end of the day, this is a kid that gives them really good reps when he's in there, does a lot of really nice things, and I think will be a big piece of them not only being a good offensive line with a lot of talented kids, but being one that's consistent in day out, can rotate those guys out and still have a very stout front. So very excited for him. I think he's going to take a big step forward. But let's move on to Utah, and we got Sione Fotu is the guy that Kenyon has kind of dubbed as the unsung hero or the hidden gem, as he called it. And this is a guy that debuted in 2022, left for a 2-year-long Latter-day Saints mission, and then has returned to Utah since. He returned last year. He had 18 tackles and 7 actually in the season opening victory against Florida. So definitely a guy that, if you get him on the field, has ability, and he will have to play a big part, because while this defense is, I think, going to be solid just because of the person that I think Kyle Whittingham is, there is some worry there, and there is not necessarily the most experience in the world, so would definitely like to build that out a little bit more. For me, I went Money Parks. I feel like everyone is putting a lot of energy into Dorian Singer, and I fully understand that. That is the best wide receiver on this group, but I think if they're going to be successful, especially throwing the ball, Money Parks is going to be the guy that really kind of opens everything up. I think he is going to give a lot of opportunities to other guys by running those, drag routes across the middle of the field, or even just going deep and kind of taking a safety in a corner with him. I think he's a huge piece to this offense, even as, a decoy to be used from time to time. I think he could be hugely helpful to them. For Alabama, Kenyon went the kind of direction of special teams, which I totally agree, and actually went a little bit later here. But James Burnip is as good of a punter as there is in the country. And as we know, field position is a huge battle in these games, especially in college football, when if you can pin someone deep, some mistakes happen pretty quickly. So I will definitely be watching him very closely. He is a huge asset for them. They're not necessarily super confident in their kicking ability right now, so James Burnip is going to be hugely important for them in the field position battle, and just keeping them, in a position to win a lot of ball games when maybe their offense isn't quite playing the way that they would hope. But one guy that I think could get their offense to that next level is Kendrick Law. I think he's someone that was kind of behind a couple of guys and was a little bit underutilized the past couple of years, but the speed on this kid is out of this world. He's going to return kicks for them. He's going to be a huge piece of this team, and I think he's someone that he might not make every play. He might not make the most plays on the team. In fact, I would be surprised if he was the leading receiver, but I do think he's going to make big plays. I think he's going to make big time chunk plays that kind of get this offense rolling, which is a huge thing for them. And also just kind of a good failsafe for Jalen Milroe to throw a little screen out to him and let him go to work. So definitely something to watch there. Then we go to Texas, and he goes Justice Finkley, the edge rusher who is stuck behind some dudes. I won't lie about that. He's someone that he got 14 tackles a year ago, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and 4 hurries. So definitely was a little bit productive while on the field. Is stuck behind some really, really talented guys, but when you are able to rotate as many guys and have someone like Justice Finkley coming off the bench, it's a luxury that not a lot of people have. So I think Justice Finkley is someone that maybe won't make a kind of like Kendrick Law, just on the defensive side of the ball. He might not be the guy that makes the most plays from that edge rusher position, but he's going to make some big time plays that will win some games for Texas. I feel pretty confident about that. And then Trey Wisner, the running back that is kind of stuck behind the two-headed monster of Jaden Blue and Cedric Baxter, and I think he's someone that will carve out the niche that Keelan Robinson had in this offense a year ago, kind of the gadget guy that you play around with a little bit in multi-running back sets, and this kid can go. So whenever you get the ball in his hands, I think he could be a huge game changer. But let's move on to Oregon here, and let's talk about the center. I think this is a guy that absolutely is filling probably the biggest shoes of this group. You have Jackson Powers Johnson walking out the door, and I think this is going to be huge for him. I think it's so crazy that they're losing someone so important at a position that people might not notice all that much, but Oregon really needs this guy to hit, and if he can, it'll be a huge thing for them. But then let's move to my pick, and Dante Manning is the guy that I have tabbed. They have so many guys coming in on the back end of that defense from the transfer portal, but they have one guy that has been there for quite a bit, and that's Dante Manning. He's been there, I believe, ever since Dan Lanning showed up, and he's been a huge piece for them. I think he's going to be huge just to keep everything in order the way it's supposed to be, which is a huge part of this, is something that they definitely need to be really, really good at. Make sure that everyone is in alignment, make sure that everyone is doing things on and off the field the way they should. So that'll be interesting to watch. Another DB on this list is David Kenyon's pick for Ohio State, Jermaine Matthews Jr., someone that is a little bit behind, this remarkable group on the back end of that defense. But even as a freshman, he had 13 tackles, 3 pass breakups, and a pick 6. So he's someone that can definitely make plays. He's someone that I think will probably be more rotational, but when he's on the field, definitely keep an eye out on him. But for my pick, I have Jaden Fielding. He is someone that went 16 for 20 as the place kicker last year. It is a luxury to have a guy coming back at place kicker and someone that has tons of experience, both, place kicking and doing kickoff team. He's super important to this team, and I think definitely gives them at least a breath of fresh air when they can send out a kicker with total confidence. And then let's get to the top team and Georgia. And he picked Oscar Delp, which I think is the perfect pick. I think it's someone that everyone's talking about, Ben Urasek coming in from Stanford and Brock Bowers walking out. Oscar Delp might be right there with them in terms of how good they are. I think Oscar Delp is the best blocker of the group pretty comfortably. He had 24 catches, 284 yards, and 3 touchdowns a year ago. So he's someone that can step up. He's someone that can do the things that are necessary, and he's someone that can really put a defensive end on his butt. So I would definitely be watching this kid. I think NFL scouts are going to fall in love with this kid over this year. And then for my pick, I had Dan Jackson, the safety. I think he's someone that definitely is a little bit behind, the talent level around him, but the dude plays fast, and he plays hard, and he definitely loves the Georgia Bulldogs. That's for damn sure. But I think he's someone that plays just insanely fast, does everything the way that the coach would want him to do, and just plays the game the way that you would love your safety to play the game. So really, really like that kid. I think he is someone that not only on the field but off the field plays a huge part in that back end being successful next year. But that'll do it for this one. I think there are so many incredible names that really make these college football teams special, right? We talk so much about the top level guys. We talk so much about, the ability of the, starting quarterbacks and the starting wide receivers and all of that. And not necessarily that we shouldn't, but those guys that we just highlighted are the guys that will win championships for these teams. They're the ones that will make the plays that you need them to make. Whenever you talk about, a late postseason run, even in the NFL or the MLB especially, you have guys that you don't expect to step up in big time moments. And that's exactly the same thing in college football. So those guys are definitely guys to watch. I think they will be huge pieces for their teams going forward, especially into 2024. But let's take our last break here, and then when we come back, we will talk about the Miami Hurricanes. I think they are in a position to do a lot of work over the next 2 weeks, and I will break down why I think they might just be the most improved team over the next 2 weeks right after this. So stick with us.